Momir. I've been with IOSG Ventures since early 2020. Early on, mostly focused on DeFi research and investment, but over the years became more of a generalist and recently spending a lot of time looking at the crypto and AI intersection, and very happy to have some exciting lineup over here today. We have Mike from Talus and Ron from Inference Labs and Theoriq Network, but I guess it's best to let the opportunity for the guys to say hi and brief introduction for the audience. Mike.
I'm Mike. I'm the CEO and founder of Talus Network. We're building an L1 blockchain for fully on-chain AI agents. Yeah, we'll dive into it more in detail.
Great. I'm Ron Chan. I'm one of the co-founders of Inference Labs. What we're working on is the universal verification layer for AI. Essentially, how we accomplish this is taking AI models and converting them to a mathematical representation. And by doing so, we can apply other technologies such as cryptography, and in our case, zero-knowledge cryptography. So essentially, we allow for the efficiency of off-chain compute, at the same time not introducing additional trust assumptions.
Hey, I'm Ron, co-founder of Theoriq. And my background, I've been an entrepreneur and working in AI for most of my career, whether it was building a multi-$100-million ad tech business at QuantCast, building an AI company for enterprise and selling it to Teradata, being at Canada's largest AI research lab, Vector Institute, leading engineering and infrastructure, or being in the CTO office responsible for applied AI at Google. You know, the founding team at Theoriq are all AI veterans, people I'd worked with before, and we were passionate about the importance of not letting a few billionaires control this technology that's going to be so instrumental in our future as humanity. We really felt it was important to embrace the ethos of Web3 decentralization and make AI benefit the community. And you know, we really think the point of leverage around that is AI agents. We believe that a majority of the knowledge work that is done by people today will be done by AI agents by the end of the decade. And we passionately believe that all of us have something to offer to teach agents. And so a world of specialized agents working together is where what the future holds and that we as a community can come together and enable. So we're excited. We just launched our testnet today for Theoriq. It's designed to enable that. Specialized agents working together, allowing payments, allowing ownership, and critically, composability, so agents can work together, they can communicate in natural language, and have reputation, so you can assess high-quality agents and put them together to solve amazing tasks. So excited for the conversation here today.
I guess we can start with the question why. So obviously there is a lot of optimism for crypto and AI intersection, but there is also quite a few skeptics and also some cynical people. I saw one of the panels I think held today at one of the other events is called Crypto and AI, a cringe arranged marriage. So I guess like it's always important to also address some of the skepticism, and I guess each of you have different perspective on why merger of these two technologies is actually necessary and important. So maybe we can start with this motivation for building in the crypto and AI intersection at the first place.
So what's the question?
The motivation for building at the intersection of the crypto and AI and essentially merging these two technologies.
As Ron said, and I'm going to build on top of it, the first principle is AI is a centralizing technology. Blockchain is centralized technology. We want to have people build AI in their closed servers and closed rooms. They're going to have all the power in the world. AI is probably, and we could see it with like O1, the newest ChatGPT model. It's probably more intelligent, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's probably more intelligent than most of humans. And who owns that information, who uses that information, and who controls that power is OpenAI, Facebook, eventually Apple. And I do think that like it is very important that we kind of like strip that power away and give it to the community, give it to the builders, give it to the creators, because eventually it should be community owned, not just owned by the people that only have $1 billion.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, and thanks for the preamble, Mike. I think the double Rons is going to make things a little confusing here, but you know, just to kind of add to that, a lot of the times, a lot of people kind of ask, you know, is centralized AI better than decentralized AI? And fundamentally, I think that's a human characteristic that we kind of add to these questions. I think it's very much from a technology perspective. Technology usually doesn't care. There is no perfect solution. There's only trade-offs. That's why there's so many protocols out there and everything like that. So there's, in my view, it doesn't have to be either or. There's certain areas where centralization is more performant. You look at the new Blackwell chips coming out from NVIDIA. I think with NVLink, they're hitting something like 500 terabytes per second. When you talk about that, there's just no way we can kind of speed up some of that latency around the world, right? Like when we're talking about, let's say, a Zoom call from, the East Coast of North America to, say, Australia, at best, you're going to get 100 milliseconds. So we're already talking about, 3 or 4 times orders of magnitude in latency. And we're bumping up against physics, right? You can't transmit information faster than the speed of light. So there's certain areas where centralization is going to be more performant, but decentralization is amazing. It's a beautiful technology. The internet is decentralized. So for me, I think the areas where decentralized AI will be very much performant is certain categories, like ensuring that there's model diversity, censorship resistance, and most importantly for me is sovereignty.
Yeah, I mean, I'd certainly echo both Mike and Ron's view. I would say I think there's both a technical and a social aspect to decentralization. So on the technical side, you can't decentralize everything, and you don't need to, right? And it's like decentralization doesn't mean blockchain is the technology for everything either, right? There's lots of good decentralized technologies that are not blockchain, right? So like in Theoriq, to secure agent communication, have composability, we do use public key cryptography for the protocol off-chain where you invoke an agent. That's a great use of decentralization. It's way cleaner than shared secrets, which is the obsession of every Web2 AI company. Much better tech, but it doesn't require a blockchain. You don't need consensus for that, right? You can just verify the signature. I think there's a leverage point around how do you build the AI into powerful systems that we can't allow OpenAI and their competitors to move up the stack and build this closed ecosystem where the only way you can deploy agents and use AI for useful work is to be completely trapped in their ecosystem. Right now, they're going to make it appealing. Well, it's not that appealing. Ask the average startup that tried to build on OpenAI's APIs how it's going, if they've been at it a year, and they're usually not very happy with how AI treats them, or OpenAI treats them. But, so I think one is it's really important to decentralize at that layer, to have choice in the way agents are built, to have an open marketplace. I think socially, there's 2 key things that decentralization can do. One is the incentives, right? To create incentives so all of us can participate, so that there's a role for us. People are incentivized to contribute, whether it's creating agents, contributing to models, contributing data, creating agents, using them and giving feedback. So incentives can allow Web3 to outcompete Web2 and move faster and innovate faster in that area. I think the other aspect of it that's incredibly important is also the ability to create, really community standards and feedback, right? So allowing a diversity of perspectives and options. So decentralization is incredibly important in both the technical and social layers.
Momir, if I can jump in, I completely agree. I didn't mention the composability aspect. How many silos do we have to have, like, $10,000 of compute stuck on GCP or 10,000 stuck on AWS? The ability to kind of like use and move that compute credit across like multiple platforms and ecosystems is very compelling. Because right now there is a massive constraint on the compute side of things. NVIDIA basically owns it all. Unless you have a $1 billion data center, you can't tap into those chips.
To add to that, I don't think it's only compute. Think about just like the whole data flow, how data flows through the internet. Like in Web 2, every API lives in its own silo. Every database is very hard to connect and to integrate to other databases. And when you're building applications, you end up building an application that is composed of multiple silos, and you have to build the connectors within each silo. when you're thinking about blockchains and AI and even like agents, having everything within one shared data substrate, and Balaji talks about this in one of his essays, it just makes it much more composable, much easier to just not even like send compute or get access to an API, but just like transfer data. Like even like a profile or an ID that you could just like send from one database to the other and then have a third party also like adapted to the protocols. I think that's going to enable a Cambrian explosion of applications that, even though they seem to be Web 2-like, they're going to be powered in the back end by blockchains.
Thanks, guys. And I guess you touched on this in previous answer, but maybe this one we can start from Ron Chen to reflect a little bit more on the topic of today's panel. Managing AI model lifecycle on blockchain. It seems a little bit maybe broad and maybe to some of the listeners a little bit abstract topic. So if we can dissect actually like this topic into each parts of the life cycle and where actually in which parts of the life cycle it becomes more important, the blockchain component. So maybe if you can start.
Sure. No, that's a great question. Thank you. I'll pontificate a little bit here. It's actually our origin story for Inference Labs. Prior to starting Inference Labs, I had a startup about 10 years ago, and we were deeply immersed in civil aviation. Initially started off as digital transformation, but then it kind of evolved. We rolled out like systems, embedded systems to tap into telemetry and pull off information. But around 2018, we were presented with an opportunity, and we developed a live mission-critical AI computer vision system that essentially helped with aircraft and aircraft guidance. So our SLA with these various airports, 60 in total around the world, it's running in production now, was to help aircraft guide during winter operations. So, you know, the flight deck have trouble seeing like the painted lines. So using computer vision, it really helped their operations and safety. Anyways, I'm kind of digressing here, but essentially we, in 2018, there was no like AI data set for airplanes, right? Like I couldn't go to a Kaggle. So essentially it took a lot of time. We had to get like airport to give up like ground field space, as well as aircraft and crew to taxi through and train these systems. What's interesting is when we finally rolled out that particular AI model, it exceeded all of like the KPIs. And as we rolled out the system to other airports like London Heathrow, we had to train the model all over again. And we would go back to some of the older airports and go, hey, you know, we have a new state-of-the-art model. Do you guys want us to deploy it? And what's interesting is the answer was no. A lot of people are thinking AI, everything has to be the state of the art. It isn't necessarily true. The reason why they said no was because we actually had to go through months and months of site acceptance testing, and it required multiple stakeholders, so like city, states, FAA, airlines to kind of examine this. And if there was a safety incursion or something happened, there would actually be like a full report. FAA would get involved to examine it. And AIs inherently are black boxes, and we don't really have semantic versioning for AI systems. So what's interesting here is that that's the genesis story. We were like, there is a need for models that actually work and actually hold some liability. So if you look in the real world right now, if you ask ChatGPT, help me like go through my divorce proceedings and, you know, walk me through that, it's going to say no. And it's because they don't want to accept any liability. So that's where I think decentralization, model lifecycle is going to be a huge opportunity.
Thanks, Ron. Do you guys want to follow up on this one?
I mean, I think, you know, when you think about AI system, like what you're really interacting with, it's a model, but it's data, it's the tools, right? This is what makes up agents. And it turns out that all of those are things that can change. And so you have to think about like, when is it a new version, right? It's important, you know, to have a sense of like, what is stable, you know, there's obviously a big difference between a regulated industry like aviation, where you tend to have a premium on stability but moving slowly. Thus far, most applications of AI of late, certainly in the crypto space, have been in the good old-fashioned move fast and break things mindset of move quickly and keep revising things and not maintain lots of versions. So I think it does pose an interesting question, right? When you intersect with smart contracts, where you tend to have a lot more stability, right? So which I think is healthy. Like a lot of innovation can happen off chain, and but you still want to anchor on chain. What are the changes? What's the metadata? What's the contract for how the agents pay each other and communicate? And that should be something that evolves more slowly. Now, I still think it's too fast moving a space. Like, in our protocol, our smart contracts are upgradable, right? Because we don't believe that we've solved for all time the agent-to-agent interactions that, our first testnet nailed it and it will never change, right? So we think it's going to have to evolve, but it, on-chain forces some stability.
I think one of the coolest things about decentralized model lifecycle or blockchain model lifecycle, I think it's you could choose the best of the best. You could coordinate the best data, or well, incentivize the best data to be used to train a model. You could coordinate those behaviors for people because you said like there was no Kaggle before, right? Now you have Kaggle, you could download data, but Kaggle doesn't have access to my data. What if I want to monetize my data? I could even like provide my data to the training process of a model and then have a model that's strong, that wouldn't have existed if I wouldn't have like contributed my data, given that my data is valuable. And then Ron talked about upgradability. Okay, I built a model, maybe it's not the best model, but if it lives in a decentralized ecosystem, who decides how to upgrade the model? Who decides how to use a model? Who decides what parameters you want to set or what limitations you want to set to the model? You also have this kind of like governance capability where you could have different types of owners. You could have one owner or like multiple owners. And then you have the whole payment rails where, and eventually this transcends into agents, but we could talk about this in a bit. You have the payment rails that provide the model itself to generate some type of revenue or even just like utilize blockchain rails to create value or at least attract value and distribute that value back to their owners.
Cool. And we mentioned AI agents several times, and obviously Mike and Ronald are directly working around AI agents and frameworks, and Ron Chen is obviously very exposed to this space as well. So maybe the next question, in 5 to 10 years, what would be kind of a ballpark estimate in terms of how many agents we have interacting on-chain? And then according to this estimate, how we go from today to this future. Feel free to start, yeah.
I don't know how many agents will be on-chain, but I know that the majority of on-chain transactions will be handled by agents. Agents, I don't know, I could have like 100 agents, I could have one agent. Like I don't think it really matters in terms of what I want to achieve. But I do think that blockchains are the perfect ecosystem for agents to talk to one another because it's composable, to interoperate with one another, interoperate with other protocols, because now like we have some interesting solutions for that. And I do believe that obviously giving agents the ability to pay and transact or even contract other agents for work is going to be huge. There's obviously like, okay, how do you define an agent? How do you make it completely decentralized? And I do believe that there's going to be a huge value of like having these agents on chain because their interactions, their transactions, or even how they just like are verified or their execution is verified, like having that on chain being transparent, being verifiable, it's going to provide a lot of transparency to how people interact with these systems. If I'm building an agent and I'm offering to somebody in the audience, let's say, how do you really know that my agent's doing honest work and it's like providing the best results or it's even acting in the most honest way? You could only achieve that through blockchains.
Yes, I agree with that. Yeah, that's our core thesis is essentially inference is going to be the dominant form of internet traffic. Right now, we're at an inflection point. It's about 50% is like human traffic, and the rest is like scripted bots. I'm categorizing it, not just like AI agents. That number is only going to increase. I couldn't forecast exactly the actual number, but I firmly believe it's going to be like in the billions because like the cost of spinning that up is very low, but the cost of training or inference is very high. To answer your question about 5 to 10 years, we're working on like the primitives here from an infrastructure perspective to make all of that happen. But in terms of seeing the future, I think what we'll see is the lines between training and actual inference blurring. I kind of think of it as like something biological. Us as humans, when we dream, we're able to actually, our minds at least, create this content that we're completely unaware of, and at the same time, we're observing it at the same time. I think maybe 5 to 10 years, we're going to see something like that. Maybe not exactly as like, machines dreaming, but the ability for it to constantly train itself in real time and provide inference.
Isn't that like happening right now with like O1, that like you basically, or maybe happens with RAG, but when you get the first input, it goes back into the second, like the output of the second is somehow trained by the input that I had, right?
Yeah, I agree. We're seeing like a glimmer of it, and again, like just in terms of the lifestyle and the constraint of compute, I think it's just only going to accelerate. But you're exactly right. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you work backwards, we firmly believe that collectives of agents working together are going to be producing the majority of the knowledge work that today is done by people within 5 years, and that will be done by many people training agents on things they know well, and then a far greater number of combinations of those agents coming together. So you might have millions of agents and billions of combinations or collectives creating a massive amount of economic value in 5 years. So I think it's going to be very transformative. And I think it's incredibly important that we do have a future where it's many of us are contributing to agents, and the agents are therefore giving us opportunity rather than the dystopian visions. You read former OpenAI employees talking about the universal replacement human worker agent that obviously is top of mind at OpenAI. We'll come up with one agent to bind you all. I sure hope that isn't the future, but I think we passionately need to work together to not let that dystopia be what happens.
Thanks, guys. And I guess the crypto and AI are relatively nascent vertical, but still quite dynamic, I would say, like in terms of like new teams and startups. One of the most dynamic verticals in the crypto right now, and we have a lot of interesting stuff and innovation at the compute layer, agent layer, data layer, a lot of implementation of privacy technology, and in general, like crypto incentives for achieving particular goal. Beyond your project focus, what are some of the other areas in the crypto and AI vertical that you actually value a lot and you feel it's actually worth investing a lot of time to kind of work towards executing?
I mean, maybe I'll start. I think I would say the actual layer of building the agents themselves, coming up with creativity around cool applications of AI, in crypto and leveraging crypto rails. I mean, I think every month, the tools at your disposal, the models at your disposal just keep getting better and better. So what a great time to be an agent developer. That's probably an area that I'm most excited about, is people building on top and actually creating the applications. It's not a big secret that there's been a lot of emphasis on infrastructure, and necessarily so, but all that infrastructure is just creating opportunity to create great applications, aka agents.
Yeah, I think short term, like we launched a subnet on BitTensor, and it ended up working out very well. And there's a lot of activity there, but one of the criticisms of that particular network is, it's a bit of an Ouroboros for now, but we're working hard on changing that. And essentially, it goes back to what you were saying. There's a lot of infrastructure being built right now, and when you kind of take a look at all that infrastructure, really, I think the opportunity, besides what we're working on, is because decentralized AI, I kind of look at it as this like, value chain that's working towards disrupting something monolithic like OpenAI. There's these individual pieces of infrastructure that is essentially working towards disrupting that particular specialty. I think right now, orchestration of all of this decentralization, because we embrace decentralization, but at the same time, when I was talking about technological trade-offs, one could be fragmentation. So definitely orchestrating it all together and stitching these different amazing components of infrastructure is very important.
outside of agents, I'd say edge compute and personal AI. Like now we saw like Apple Intelligence and the decentralized version of Apple Intelligence spin AI. I think it's, for me at least, it's really interesting to see a model that's requires a pretty heavy computation happen in just in two smaller devices that are distributed. Now you're seeing it with like XO Labs, which have been killing it with like their demos. But the next step of it is like, okay, how if I have like a phone right here in Singapore and I have somebody else in the US, how could we like coordinate hardware throughout the world to make hardware and data to make a model or like an output to be much more intelligent? And then like personal AI, which is, okay, now I have a model running on my phone. Is it really representative, or does it really fulfill what I want it to do? Right now we have like, okay, OpenAI, yeah, it's smart, it helps, but it's not really trained on my data. It's hard to train it on my data, and the biggest problem is, okay, I'm giving my data to OpenAI. So thinking about how can we build these different types of, I don't want to say like software, but different types of applications that, or different types of models that are personally trained, are useful for my context, for my use cases, for my abilities, and then how can I like, how could it remain private, or at least how you could incentivize behavior around it?
We have about 3 more minutes left, so I wanted to kind of follow up on the topic you guys mentioned earlier. I think Mike and Ron mentioned briefly O1 model and basically the change it introduces. So essentially now we have like much more emphasis on the inference part of things and improving the models in the post-training stage. Is this like monumental shift in terms of how we approach the improvements of the LLMs, and what would be some of the second order kind of consequences of this new approach to kind of improving LLMs, and whether this places again more emphasis on some other ways to improve post-training, like edge embeddings, RAG, providing like real-time context and information, and essentially how to think about the impact of this new approach.
Yeah, maybe I'll jump in to start. You know, I think definitely we're now seeing evidence with O1 that you can have more and more compute at runtime, improve the performance of AI systems, of agents, right? Lots of people were trying before, but typically what you'd see is after a few iterations of AI feeding output to itself, the model quality, the output quality wasn't improving, right? Now we've got, you know, claim of finally a reasoning system, a planning system that can really spend more time and get better and better results, just like people can spend longer thinking about something and get better results. So I think post-training has been happening for a while, well before O1, but, you know, we're going to continue to see smarter models that fit into the agent architecture, but also there's been a ton of progress on how to architect agents, how to use tools, how to do planning, how to access data, not just RAG, APIs. So there's a lot of progress on all fronts.
Yeah, for us, we're seeing that technology being applied, or at least the incentive model being applied, not only pushing the envelope of like larger parameter LLMs, but on our particular subnet, we partially incentivize the ability for model distillation. I think that's very important as well, being able to somehow have like more succinct, effective models that can run on edge computing. It's also going to help with model diversity.
Some of the research that we're making at Talus is looking into whether it's better to have one single model that could have a larger context window versus having multiple smaller models that get orchestrated together and add, as Ron said, like tools or RAG or APIs to it to be able to act. I do think that like it's really impressive for something like O1 to be able to like think and plan and eventually do, because it's like one single technology. But I do think that within blockchains, it opens the ability for having multiple parties contribute to the workflow of one single agent. And this community effort, hopefully and ideally, will end up providing much many more benefits than just like one single model that's controlled by one party.
Thank you, guys. Thanks also to Sahara AI for great organization, and thanks everyone for listening. We are out of time. Thank you.
Thank you.